Is that supposed to be a tactical color, or are you just trying to make sure the enemy doesn't miss? The young corporal sneered, leaning heavily against the scarred oak of the bar counter. The brass buttons on his dress blue blouse caught the dim overhead light, gleaming with a perfection that seemed out of place amidst the smell of stale beer and peanut dust. Lloyd Harlan did not turn his head. He kept his gaze fixed on the amber liquid in his glass, his large calloused hands resting on either side of it. He wore a faded red shirt, the cuffs frayed, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. It was a shirt for working in the yard, for fixing fences, not for a Saturday night at the Rusty Anchor. But Lloyd wasn't there to impress anyone. He was just thirsty. "I am talking to you, Grandpa," the corporal pressed, emboldened by the chuckles of the 3 other Marines standing behind him. They were all immaculate, fresh from the Marine Corps birthday ball that had wrapped up a few hours prior at the convention center down the road. They were young, full of adrenaline, alcohol, and the invincible arrogance that comes with wearing the eagle, globe, and anchor for the first time in a public setting. Lloyd took a slow sip of his bourbon. It burned pleasantly going down. He carefully set the glass back into the condensation ring. "I heard you the first time, son," Lloyd said. His voice was like grinding gravel, low and raspy, the voice of a man who hadn't felt the need to shout in 30 years. The corporal, whose name tag read Miller, bristled at the word son. He took a step closer, invading Lloyd's personal space. The scent of expensive cologne and whiskey wafted off him. "That is Corporal Miller to you, civilian. And you are disrespecting the uniform by ignoring me." Lloyd finally turned. He looked at Miller, really looked at him. He saw the high and tight haircut, the sharp crease of the trousers, the single row of ribbons on his chest. National defense, global war on terrorism, good conduct. It was a baby's rack. Lloyd's eyes, watery and surrounded by a map of deep wrinkles, held no fear. They held a profound, exhausting patience. "Nice uniform, Corporal," Lloyd said softly. "Wear it well." He turned back to his drink, dismissing the young man with a slight hunch of his shoulders. It was the wrong move. Miller, fueled by liquid courage and the need to perform for his peers, slammed his hand down on the bar next to Lloyd's drink. The glass rattled. Liquid sloshed over the rim. The bartender, a burly man named Sully, who had been wiping down glasses and watching the interaction with growing unease, stepped forward. "Hey, take it easy, gentlemen. He is a regular. Let him be." "Stay out of this, barkeep," Miller snapped, not looking away from the old man in the red shirt. He poked a finger into Lloyd's shoulder. The red shirt bunched up. "You know, people like you make me sick. You sit here in your lumberjack costume, probably never did a damn thing for this country, staring at us like you know something. What is your story, huh? Did you dodge the draft? Did you have bone spurs?" Lloyd sighed. It was a long, heavy exhale that seemed to deflate his chest. He reached into his back pocket to pull out a few crumpled bills to pay his tab, deciding it was time to leave. As he did, his wallet fell open on the bar. A small black and white photo, cracked with age, slid halfway out of a plastic sleeve. Miller snatched the wallet before Lloyd could react. "Give that back," Lloyd said, his voice dropping an octave. Miller laughed, holding the wallet out of reach. "Look at this, boys." He flipped it open. The photo showed a group of men in jungle fatigues standing in mud that looked deep enough to swallow a boot. They looked hollowed out, their eyes thousand-yard stares captured on film. Miller squinted at the back of the photo where faint handwriting was scrawled. "To the old bear from the survivors of Hill 881," Miller read aloud. He looked at Lloyd, then burst into a loud, braying laugh. "Old bear? That is your call sign? What, like the stuffed animal? Or because you are slow and hairy?" The other Marines joined in, their laughter sharp and mocking in the quiet bar. "Old bear," shouted a private from the back. "Hey, watch out, he might hibernate on us." "Did you get that name because you liked to sleep in caves while the real men were fighting?" Miller asked, tossing the wallet onto the sticky bar top. It slid into a puddle of spilled beer. Lloyd stared at the wallet. He didn't wipe it off. He just placed his hand over it, covering the photo of the dead boys. "Bear," Lloyd whispered, almost to himself. For a split second, the dive bar dissolved. The smell of stale beer was replaced by the copper tang of blood and the rot of wet vegetation. The darkness of the bar became the suffocating canopy of a triple canopy jungle. A roar tore through Lloyd's mind. Not a human sound, but the guttural scream of a man pushing past the limits of sanity to keep a machine gun firing while the world exploded around him. The feeling of a red headband tightening against a sweating forehead. The weight of bodies. The isolation. Then the jukebox kicked in with a country song, and the jungle vanished. Lloyd was just an old man in a red shirt again, surrounded by boys who thought they were wolves. Sully, the bartender, had seen enough. He had known Lloyd for 5 years. He knew the old man tipped well, drank quietly, and never started trouble. But he also knew that Lloyd had a tremor in his left hand that only stopped when a loud noise happened, like a dropped tray, at which point Lloyd would go perfectly, terrifyingly still. Sully reached under the bar, but not for a weapon. He grabbed his cell phone. He texted a number Lloyd had given him years ago, written on a cocktail napkin. It was a number for emergencies, Lloyd had said. If I ever fall out and can't get up, or if I stop breathing. But this felt like an emergency of a different kind. Sully didn't know who was on the other end, but he typed quickly. Lloyd Harlan is at the Rusty Anchor. Marines are harassing him. It's getting bad. He hit send, hoping whoever was on the other end cared enough to reply. Back on the floor, Miller was relentless. You going to cry, old bear? You going to tell us how tough you were back in the Stone Age? I am asking you to leave me alone, Lloyd said. His hands were gripping the edge of the bar so hard his knuckles were white. Or what? Miller challenged. You will gum me to death. Miller's friend, a sergeant who seemed slightly more sober but still amused, stepped in. Come on, Miller. Let's grab a table. He's just a senile old civvy. No, Miller said, shaking off the hand. He is disrespectful. He hasn't looked me in the eye once. He thinks he is better than us. Lloyd slowly lifted his head. He looked straight into Miller's eyes. The blue of Lloyd's irises seemed to darken, like deep ocean water turning to ice. The air around the stool seemed to drop 10 degrees. I do not think I am better than you, Lloyd said. I think you are lucky. You have never seen what I have seen. You have never had to be what I had to be. Miller blinked, unnerved for a second by the intensity, but his ego pushed him forward. He leaned in, his face inches from Lloyd's. I think you are full of crap. I think you are a stolen valor fraud with a fake picture in your wallet. 5 miles away, at the Grand Hotel ballroom, the music was loud, and the champagne was flowing. The Marine Corps ball was winding down, but the senior leadership was still present in the VIP lounge. General Michael Iron Mike Vance, a 3-star general, stood in his evening dress uniform. The midnight blue jacket with the gold cummerbund fit him perfectly, his chest a heavy wall of miniature medals that chimed softly when he moved. He was laughing at a story from a colonel when his aide-de-camp, a young captain, stepped into the circle. The captain's face was pale. He held up a phone. Sir, I am sorry to interrupt. We just got a text from a civilian number. It concerns a Lloyd Harlan. The glass of scotch in General Vance's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. The room seemed to tilt. The laughter died in his throat. Read it, the general commanded. His voice, usually booming and jovial, was suddenly razor-sharp. The captain read the text. Lloyd Harlan is at the Rusty Anchor. Marines are harassing him. It's getting bad. General Vance handed his glass to the colonel without looking at him. Get the detail, Vance said. Now, sir, the colonel asked, is everything all right? Who is Lloyd Harlan? General Vance turned to the room of officers. His face was a mask of cold fury, a look that terrified subordinates and enemies alike. Lloyd Harlan is the reason I am standing here, Vance said. Lloyd Harlan is the old bear, and if one of my Marines touches a hair on his head, I will burn this entire command to the ground. He strode toward the exit, his cape swirling behind him. Move. Back at the Rusty Anchor, the situation was deteriorating. Miller had grabbed the back of Lloyd's red shirt. Stand up when I am talking to you, Miller shouted. Lloyd didn't move. He was breathing rhythmically, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He was counting backward from 10. He knew exactly how to dismantle the human body. He knew that Miller was leaning too far forward, that his center of gravity was compromised. He knew that a simple backward thrust of his elbow would shatter Miller's solar plexus, and a follow-up strike would crush his windpipe. 9. He wanted the boy to go home and live a long life, but the boy was making it very hard. Get your hands off him, Sully shouted from behind the bar, reaching for a baseball bat. You stay back, the other Marines yelled, stepping between the bar and Miller. Miller yanked on the shirt again. I said, stand up, old man. Show some respect to your superiors. 7, 6. Lloyd's hand moved. It wasn't a strike. He simply reached up and clamped his hand over Miller's wrist. His grip was like a steel vise. The strength was shocking, unnatural for a man of his age. Miller gasped, his eyes widening. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't. It felt like his wrist was caught in hydraulic machinery. Let go, Miller stammered. You are making a mistake, Lloyd said quietly. The tremor in his hand was gone. Miller, panicked and humiliated, swung his other fist. It was a clumsy, desperate punch. It grazed Lloyd's cheekbone, splitting the thin skin. A trickle of blood ran down into Lloyd's gray beard. The bar went silent. Miller froze. He had just struck an elderly civilian. The reality of his career ending flashed before his eyes, but the adrenaline was still pumping. Lloyd didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He slowly turned his head back to Miller, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. 5, Lloyd whispered. Suddenly the front door of the rusty anchor burst open. It wasn't just opened, it was thrown with such force that the heavy wood slammed against the interior wall, shaking the framed photos of local sports teams. Blue lights flashed frantically outside, cutting through the smoky gloom of the bar. "Room 10 hut," a voice bellowed. It was a roar that commanded absolute obedience, trained into the marrow of every person in the room who had ever marched on yellow footprints. The 4 Marines, including Miller, instinctively snapped to attention. Miller's arm dropped from Lloyd's shirt. He spun toward the door, his heels clicking together, his back ramrod straight. Framed in the doorway was a phalanx of shore patrol and military police, but they parted instantly. Walking through the center was a figure that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. General Vance, in the formal evening dress uniform, looked like a vision of judgment. The gold bullion on his shoulders caught the light. The medals on his chest told a story of 3 decades of war. He did not walk, he stalked. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto the scene at the bar. He saw the spilled drink. He saw the red shirt. He saw the trickle of blood on Lloyd's face. The silence in the bar was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. General Vance stopped 3 feet from Corporal Miller. The general was a large man, but in that moment he seemed 10 feet tall. He didn't look at Miller. He looked past him, directly at the old man on the stool. Miller was trembling. He knew who this was. Everyone knew Iron Mike. Miller was sweating profusely, his eyes fixed on the wall ahead, praying for invisibility. General Vance slowly raised his hand. It was a crisp, perfect salute. He held it. He held it for a long 5 seconds. "Sir," the general said, his voice thick with emotion. Miller was confused. Was the general saluting him? No, that was impossible. Lloyd Harlan slowly swiveled on his stool. He looked at the general. He reached up with a napkin and wiped the blood from his cheek. He didn't salute back. Civilians don't salute. But he nodded. A slow, respectful nod of recognition. "Hello, Mikey," Lloyd said. The general dropped his salute. He stepped forward, bypassing the Marines as if they were furniture, and grabbed Lloyd's hand. He didn't shake it. He held it with both of his own. "I got here as fast as I could, Bear," Vance said. The use of the call sign hit Miller like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. The old Bear wasn't a joke. It wasn't a made-up name. The commanding general of the division just used it. Lloyd looked at Vance's uniform. "You look like a penguin, Mike. A penguin with a lot of brass." Vance let out a short, wet laugh. "And you look like you've been fighting with children." Vance turned. The smile vanished from his face instantly. He pivoted on his heel to face Corporal Miller and his friends. The transformation from friend to executioner was terrifying. "Corporal," Vance said. His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. "Sir," Miller squeaked. "Do you know who this man is?" Vance asked. "No, sir," Miller whispered. Vance stepped closer. He leaned into Miller's face. "This man is Master Sergeant Lloyd Harlan, retired. Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 clusters, 5 Purple Hearts. He is the reason the 3rd Battalion made it out of the Ashau Valley in '69. Miller's knees began to shake. "He was a Force Recon team leader when your father was still swimming in his daddy's sack," Vance continued, his voice rising. "They called him Old Bear because when his team was overrun, he refused to retreat. He stayed behind. He held a hill alone for 6 hours against a company of NVA regulars, so his wounded could be evacuated." Vance pointed a gloved finger at his own chest. "I was one of those wounded, Corporal. I was a private. I had a sucking chest wound. This man carried me 3 miles through a monsoon with a bullet in his own leg. He is not a civilian. He is a living monument, and you mocked him." Vance looked at the red shirt, then at Miller's pristine blue uniform. "You are not fit to wear the same colors as him," Vance spat. "You are a disgrace to my corps." Miller was crying now. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the sweat. "Sir, I didn't know. Ignorance is not an excuse for dishonor," Vance roared. The sound shook the glasses behind the bar. "You attacked an elderly man. You attacked a hero. You are done. Do you hear me? You are done." Vance turned to the MPs. "Arrest these Marines. Assault, drunk and disorderly. Conduct unbecoming. Strip them of their rank. I want them in the brig before I finish my drink." "Aye, aye, sir," the MPs shouted. moving forward with handcuffs. "Wait," Lloyd said. The single word stopped the MPs in their tracks. They looked at the general. The general looked at Lloyd. Lloyd slid off the stool. He stood up, looking slightly unsteady, but he held his ground. He walked over to Miller. The boy was shaking, terrified, his career in ashes, his life over. Lloyd looked at the general. "Mike, let them go." Vance looked shocked. "Bear, he hit you. He drew blood. He is a boy," Lloyd said. "He is a stupid boy who drank too much and wanted to feel big. If you throw him in the brig, you ruin him. You throw him out, he becomes bitter. He becomes a civilian who hates the Corps." Lloyd turned to Miller. Miller couldn't meet his eyes. "Look at me, son," Lloyd said. Miller looked up. He saw the blood on Lloyd's cheek. He saw the kindness in the old man's eyes that shouldn't have been there. "You wanted to be a tough guy," Lloyd said. "Real toughness isn't about how loud you yell or how crisp your uniform is. It is about who you protect. Tonight you attacked the weak, or what you thought was weak. That is cowardice." Lloyd reached out and adjusted Miller's collar, which was slightly askew. "You want to be a Marine? Then act like one. Protect the old men. Don't fight them." Lloyd looked back at Vance. "Don't discharge them, Mike. That is the easy way out. Make them earn it back. Give them the worst details you have. Let them scrub the latrines until their fingers bleed. Let them sandbag the entire base. But teach them." Vance stared at Lloyd. The anger in the general's eyes slowly faded, replaced by the same look of adoration he had held 40 years ago in a rice paddy. "You haven't changed, Bear," Vance said softly. "You are still saving the ones who don't deserve it." Lloyd shrugged. "Someone saved me once." The memory flashed for a second. Not the jungle this time, but a small house in the States, years after the war. Lloyd, drunk, angry, holding a pistol. A young officer knocking on the door, refusing to leave until Lloyd put the gun down. That officer was Mike Vance. Vance sighed. He looked at the MPs. "Stand down." He turned to Miller. "You heard the man. You are not going to the brig. But God help you, you are going to wish you had. You are reporting to my Sergeant Major at 0500. You will be on restriction for the foreseeable future, and every paycheck you earn for the next 6 months is going to a veterans charity of Master Sergeant Harlan's choosing. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," Miller shouted, relief flooding his voice. And Vance added, leaning in close, "You will never ever disrespect a civilian again. I don't care if he is a beggar on the street. You treat him with dignity, because you never know who you are talking to." "Yes, sir." "Get out of my sight," Vance growled. The 4 Marines scrambled toward the door, their tails between their legs. As Miller passed Lloyd, he stopped. He didn't know what to do. He looked at the old man, really looked at him this time. "I am sorry," Miller whispered. "I am so sorry." Lloyd just nodded. "Go on, son. Get better." The Marines vanished into the night. The bar was quiet again, save for the hum of the cooler and the distant wail of sirens fading away. Vance turned to the bar. "Sully, give me whatever he is drinking, and put it on my tab." Sully grinned, his hands shaking slightly as he poured a bourbon. "On the house, General. For both of you." Vance took the glass. He unbuttoned his tight uniform jacket and sat on the stool next to Lloyd, the General and the old bear, side by side. "How is the hip?" Vance asked, sipping his drink. "Rain makes it ache," Lloyd said. Vance nodded. "The shoulder still clicks when I lift my arm." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 old warriors in a dive bar, the years melting away. "You know," Vance said, swirling his drink, "I really was going to burn them down." "I know," Lloyd said. "That is why I stopped you. You are too emotional, Mikey." "Always were." Vance chuckled. "Someone has to be the fire. You were always the ice." Lloyd touched the photo in his wallet, the one still sitting on the bar top. It was drying out. "They just didn't know," Lloyd said softly. "They see an old man. They see a target. They don't see the cost. We have to teach them," Vance agreed. "We have to keep teaching them." Lloyd took a sip of his bourbon. He looked at the general's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The medals, the power, the command. Then he looked at his own reflection, the red shirt, the gray beard, the tired eyes. "You are doing a good job, General," Lloyd said. Vance shook his head. "I am just holding the line until the next watch comes in." They finished their drinks in comfortable silence. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded, leaving behind a warm, quiet camaraderie. When they stood up to leave, Vance insisted on walking Lloyd to his truck. The cool night air was sharp. The general's personal security detail was waiting by a line of black SUVs, watching the perimeter with eagle eyes. Vance opened the door of Lloyd's rusted pickup truck. "Take care of yourself, Bear," Vance said, gripping Lloyd's hand one last time. "Don't make me come down here and court-martial a bunch of toddlers again." Lloyd smiled. "I will try to keep a low profile." Vance stood at attention as Lloyd started the engine. The old truck coughed to life, spewing a bit of blue smoke. As Lloyd pulled out of the parking lot, he looked in the rearview mirror. Under the harsh glare of the street lamp, the three-star general was holding a salute. Perfect, rigid, respectful. Lloyd lifted his hand from the steering wheel and gave a small wave. The next morning, at Camp Lejeune, Corporal Miller stood in front of a mirror. He looked at his uniform. He looked at the ribbons. He thought about the old man in the red shirt. He took the uniform off and carefully hung it up. Then he put on his utilities, grabbed a bucket and a brush, and marched toward the latrines. He scrubbed for 10 hours. His back ached, his fingers blistered, but every time he wanted to complain, he thought of the Ashau Valley. He thought of the old bear carrying a wounded man through the mud, and he scrubbed harder. Weeks later, a package arrived at Lloyd's small house. Inside was a framed letter of apology, written by hand, signed by 4 Marines. And tucked into the corner of the frame was a new photo, Corporal Miller and his team, standing in front of a monument, looking tired, humble, and serious. Lloyd placed the frame on his mantel, right next to the black and white photo of the boys in the jungle. He poured himself a small glass of iced tea, sat in his recliner, and watched the sun go down. The old bear rested, content that the cubs were finally learning how to walk. If you enjoyed this story of hidden valor and justice, please like the video and subscribe to Veteran Valor for more stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that respect is earned, not worn.